Hello and welcome to the channel. My name's Sean Carpenter. I hope everyone's having a great spooky season so far. This is honestly my favorite time of the year. So I wanted to get it started off by counting down my pick of the top 10 scariest episodes of Grizzly Tales for Gruesome Kids. Now you might wonder, how scary can an early 2000s animated kids show really be? Well, you'd be surprised. Some of these episodes are pretty damn creepy. And except for one that's here mainly for nostalgic purposes, I'd say I got some of the best. But anyways, I'm not going to do a long intro here, so let's just jump right in and get started. Here are the top 10 scariest episodes of Grizzly Tales for Gruesome Kids. 10. Starting off, we have The Spaghetti Man. Admittedly not the scariest episode, but it's one I had to include mainly for nostalgia and how much it creeped me out as a kid. The episode tells the story of a boy named Timothy who won't eat anything his parents give him. He makes a big fuss and throws his food at the windows, which is when his family gets an unexpected visit from a shadowy figure. They hear the front door open and creaking down the hallway, but when the father goes to check, he doesn't find anyone there. Timothy, who's left alone in the kitchen, begins to feel uneasy as he starts smelling flour. He tries to scream for his parents, but feels a hand covering his mouth and long nails scratching against his face. His parents come back and everything goes back to normal. This is when his mother claims they may have just been visited by the Spaghetti Man. She goes on to tell Timothy that children who don't eat their food end up pacified in his factory. Timothy, naturally, having just been grabbed, scratched, and tickled by an invisible supernatural force, takes his mother's advice and eats everything on his plate from that day on. Nah, he yells, "Boulder Dash!" and throws another plate at the window. Just a quick side note, but you hear some really obscure and hilarious British slang in these episodes. Naturally, because the show is made in England. But it's just funny hearing it sometimes. Boulder Dash! Anyways, back to the story. Timothy gets up from the table without eating anything and asking for permission, which somehow is worse than him throwing his food against the window because his mom completely loses it when he gets up. She drags him back to the kitchen and says he's not leaving until he finishes his toast? Okay, wait a sec, hold on, sorry. This whole time, I thought he was refusing to eat vegetables, I don't know, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, whatever kids don't like. But this whole time it's been toast? The kid is willing to risk his life because he hates toast. Just eat the damn toast. Bloody wanker. Okay, sorry, no more interruptions. Anyways, Timothy literally won't eat the toast. He sits at the kitchen table for 2 days. And on the morning of the third day, he waits for his parents to leave the house before enacting his revenge. Timothy runs upstairs and begins his plot to flood the bathroom by plugging the drain and turning on all the faucets. As the water rises, he hears the front door open and the stairs creaking as someone comes up. Timothy eagerly awaits his mother so she can discover the mess and freak out. But as the bathroom door opens, there's no one there, just the returning smell of flour. He awakens in a room full of other kids, all wearing labels like spaghetti or macaroni. He looks down at his shirt and sees his own label, lasagna. Timothy jumps up on the table and begins telling the other kids that the Spaghetti Man is just a story their parents made up. Still, he doesn't believe. He tells them he's leaving and starts heading to the door, but before he can reach it, he's grabbed by the shadowy figure, while the other kids look on in horror. There's literally nothing they can do, which is the scariest part of the episode. The helplessness of the situation. Like you can't fight a shadow, and the idea of being grabbed by it while you're struggling to free yourself, clawing at your own skin, is truly terrifying. We then get a shot of the pasta machine overheating, presumably from turning all the kids into more pasta. The episode then ends with his parents enjoying a nice peaceful meal without Timothy. Not too bad for a kids animated show, huh? And that was just number 10. Let's continue on and see what else we have. 9. Next, we have Old MacDonald's Farm, which tells the story of a girl named Angela who simply just doesn't like old people. Apparently, she thinks they don't respect her, so she preemptively doesn't respect them. Kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, but whatever. So it's Speak Your Mind Day at school, which she uses to complain to the class about how old people are so annoying and they always want something like her seat on the bus or to hold open a door for them, how they have wrinkly skin, how they're useless. She goes on, and her teacher obviously gets upset, starts questioning her if she really feels this way. What about her parents? Now, Angela, being a nice little psychopath, suggests that because they look like chickens, because of their wrinkly skin, they should be disposed of in the same manner. Now, while all this is going on, we see that Angela's speech is actually being captured by a secretive spy device planted in the school's ventilation shafts. This message then gets relayed to a government agency where a lady reads out, "Disrespect her," as if, that's her crime. Over the next few days, Angela sees more and more old people as if they're following her around, and when they leave, there remains a strange, musty smell. Now we go full M. Night Shyamalan here because her disrespect has apparently risen an army of dead pensioners whose sole purpose is to capture her and teach her a lesson. I mean, the girl is obviously insane, but now we have zombies getting involved with secret government agencies. I'm just saying it seems a little excessive. We cut to one day Angela's leaving her house as she's followed by an old lady. They then set up a trap for her, knock her out, and push her into the back of an ambulance before driving her to a secret aircraft hangar. It's here where she's confronted by the general of the operation, who explains to her the process by which she will be turned into a chicken and given to a farmer to dispatch of, just as she suggested. She tries to apologize, which obviously doesn't work. We then see the image of her shadow as it goes through the process of transforming into a chicken. They then drive her to a farm and drop her in the coop to be chosen the next day by the farmer. Now, assuming her consciousness is still intact within the chicken body, this is a pretty horrifying way to go. Now, coming in at number 8, we have the Grub Blub Blub. The story opens up with the scene of a museum of freaks and oddities that supposedly contains the world's largest witchetty grub, which are apparently these things right here. We then cut to our main character, a little girl named Savannah, who just happens to be extremely lazy. Unfortunately for her, she also has extremely active parents who are always going on adventures and hikes and walks and climbing mountains. Now this almost kind of feels like a cursed situation, because normally with two very outdoorsy parents, you'd assume it would rub off on the child like at a young age, which apparently is not the case here. For her summer holiday, Savannah begs her parents to take her to a bed and breakfast, which has her two favorite activities, laying down and eating. However, her parents have a little surprise for the holiday, a camping trip. So basically her worst nightmare. Now I know we as the audience are supposed to think, wow, what a lazy kid. Which I did kind of until the next morning when they're leaving for the campsite and it's revealed they're not driving. No, they're not taking a bus. No, the actual plan is to bike ride for 6 hours to the campsite. This would be pretty extreme for most people, but considering Savannah, it's downright evil. And this is for the girl's summer holiday. I'm actually starting to feel a bit sorry for her. They eventually make it to the campsite and are greeted by what is probably a top 10 demonic camp counselor of all time. She informs them of the camp's 2 rules. Number 1, have fun. Number 2, no one can stay in bed beyond sunrise. Now what the hell is this? Do the parents actually hate their child, or like what's happening here? Anyways, while arguing with the camp demon, one of our little witchetty bug friends falls out of the sky onto Savannah's head. She freaks out obviously and looks up to see thousands of them sleeping in the trees. Surely not foreshadowing anything. She's finally able to retreat into their tent, where she plans to stay for the week until it's time to go home. I'm actually kind of with her on this one, screw this place. But her parents drag her out to see the nearby attractions, like a lawnmower museum. Okay, no, the parents hate her. It's the only explanation. She finally puts her foot down and refuses to go to an old sewage site and insists on napping instead. Hell yeah, you tell him. Although in retrospect, this was probably not the best idea. We then see the camp demon snacking on some witchetty grubs. Yep, totally normal, nothing to see here, before a nighttime shot of their tent. Savannah is awoken by a strange plopping noise. She looks around and finds nothing. Her parents had gone on a midnight hike. She then shines her flashlight, her torch, gotta be British here, at the roof of the tent and sees the shadows of thousands of the grubs. Savannah peeks outside to find it raining grubs from the trees and the roof of her tent. She rushes back inside, but they start pouring in, crawling all over her. Now, to anyone scared of bugs, this is just an absolute nightmare. I personally don't really hate them, but even this is just disgusting for me. We are then told and shown by the shadows in the tent that the grubs cocoon her alive, like a human caterpillar basically. No, not a human centipede this time. Before slithering back to bed. When her parents come back, they can't find Savannah, just a large grub which the father throws out into the woods. They pack up and go home without her, and we are told she gets found by the owner of the museum shown in the beginning. The final shot of the episode is one of Grub Savannah crying in a glass display case. So not only did she go through one of the most horrifying transformations on the show, but now she has to live as an amusement park attraction for the rest of her life. Getting scared yet? Next, we have a story about a girl named Poppy, who the show describes as being obsessed with gossip. So I guess just a regular teenage girl then. She apparently spends all her time talking on the phone, making up rumors about other kids at the school. Her parents obviously hate her always being on the phone, especially because she uses 6 at once. So her father comes up with the bright idea to buy her a new phone? Not sure that's the best course of action, but I guess it's to make her only use one, which they think is better than using 6 at once. This phone is apparently the newest and best because it has this crazy feature where it can take pictures. Remember when that was a brand new innovative feature of phones? Kinda crazy. Now Poppy ends up becoming super popular at school because everyone wants her to take their picture. Except for this one girl, Anna, who says that taking her picture will steal her soul. Poppy doesn't care and does it anyways. She then goes on a spree of taking pictures of people to use as blackmail. She takes pictures of people in the bathroom, people kissing, cheating on homework, and uses them to extort basically whatever she wants. She even does it to her parents and her grandmother. She takes her grandmother's lottery winnings under the threat of showing the photograph to her gambling counselor. There are just so many things wrong with this scene, but moving on. She practically has control over everyone, but it's still not enough, so she chases that Anna girl around trying to get her picture since she knows she's scared. Anna runs into a store and hides behind her father. He tells Poppy to leave them alone and explains that taking someone's picture takes a piece of their soul and seals it in the photo. Which I know is a common belief held by many cultures, especially I know Native Americans believe this. He then warns her of the soul stealer, and she responds by taking his photo. You might call this a bit of a mistake, for later that night, when she goes through the photos she's taken, she notices a face in every one, the soul stealer. She then sees body parts start to appear in the photos, first an arm, then a leg, with more parts appearing the more photos she looks at. It's very reminiscent of the end of Insidious, or I think it's The Ring 2, where the spirit keeps getting closer the more pictures you take, so they have to basically just stop taking pictures altogether. A very creepy thought that something you can't see normally is getting closer and closer to you. As Poppy looks on in horror and the body is nearly complete, she notices it's wearing the same necklace as her. That's because it is her. She starts freaking out as her face materializes in the photo. She then takes a picture of herself from within the photograph, then completely disappears. A few days later, her mother notices a picture of her and the husband on vacation. She remarks that Poppy shouldn't be in this picture, right? To which the father confirms by saying, no, she wasn't even born yet. Her stolen soul had been sealed within the photograph. The episode ends zooming into the picture where you can see Poppy crying, meaning she's still conscious inside the picture. This is honestly another horrifying fate. Trapped in a photograph watching your family for eternity, or until they pass away or move or the photograph is destroyed. Maybe you wind up in a box in an attic for 50 years, who knows.
6.
Now for number 6, The Butcher Boy. Honestly, I think the build up to this episode is probably the best on the list. I just feel like I couldn't put it in the top 5 because maybe the ending is over too quickly. It's not as drawn out as some of the next ones coming up. But otherwise, it's a pretty good episode. It starts off with a boy named Gilbert, who's actually so greedy, he stages his own kidnapping and gets his parents to pay the ransom for his release. He then uses his newfound fortune to show off at school and become popular. Whenever anyone has anything cool, he goes out and buys an over-the-top, extravagant version to one-up them. He always needs to be the center of attention. That is until one day when Chuck, the butcher boy, brings his new bike to school, apparently the best one on the market, as no matter how many stores Gilbert runs to, he can't find a single bike to top it. Seemingly out of options, Gilbert decides to steal the bike, and we see a single eyeball watching him from behind the fence. Later that night, Gilbert wakes up after hearing the clang of a bicycle bell. He looks out his window to see a foggy night with Chuck across the street. He throws a butcher's knife through his window with a picture of the bike attached. Gilbert, instead of calling it quits and admitting defeat, yells out, "What bike?" The poor fool. He notices Chuck isn't across the street anymore, and that's because he's already in his bed, smiling at him. Gilbert asks what he wants, to which he replies, "I've come for my son's bike." Now, if Gilbert didn't already know he was screwed, I'm pretty sure he should by now. He stammers, Your son? But then, who are you? What are you?" A very appropriate question, all things considered. Chuck replies, "I'm my own daddy and my own son," as he removes his faces, revealing Chuck's grandfather. Gilbert tries running for the door, but he gets blocked by Chuck's grandfather. He then tries to give back the bike. Probably a bit too late, but might as well try, I guess. That's when the old man says probably the worst thing you'd want to hear in this situation. He looks at Gilbert and says, "I don't want it. Bikes are 10 a penny, but good meat is priceless," as he pulls out a butcher's cleaver. The next day at the butcher's shop, a sign reads, "Meat to die for." As if this wasn't already a gruesome enough ending, we get a final parting shot of Gilbert's mother stopping by the butcher and asking if he has any recommendations, to which he replies he has some very fresh sausages.
5.
Halfway through the list now, we have Nerves of Steel, a story about a compulsive liar named Charlie Chicken. Although, to be fair, the reason he starts lying is because his family of 4 women, mother and 3 sisters, don't pay any attention to him unless he makes up a lie or does something dangerous to make them notice. Oh, and before we go any further, I should mention that in this world, people have actual superpowers. It's kind of a My Hero Academia situation going on. Anyways, the problems begin when Charlie takes his lies and stunts to school. First, he claims to be a superhero to get out of a math test, which his classmates all believe. All except for Madison, who is actually a real superhero. Unfortunately for Charlie, her power is to detect lies. He claims to be Fearless Man and tries to impress the group, but Madison keeps calling him out. Nothing seems to work, so in a last-ditch effort, Charlie finds a sketchy clinic that claims to be able to create superheroes. He gets his nerves stripped out and replaced with steel wire. Now that he truly feels no pain, the doctor explains that he can in fact be Fearless Man. He goes back to school and begins injuring himself to prove how fearless he is, but in the process gets his arm ripped off. His mother takes him to the clinic to get him turned back to normal, but the procedure can't be reversed. The doctor's only solution is to magnetize his steel nerves so his mother can keep a better eye on him. But when he goes outside, he starts attracting all kinds of metal objects to him. The magnetization is actually so bad he ends up in court for robbing a jewelry store that he was just walking by. Now, even though this is a world with superpowers, so this is definitely possible, the judge is having none of it and orders Charlie to be locked up. The only problem is that he keeps attracting the keys to his cell and using them to break out. So they come up with the solution to isolate him in the middle of the ocean on a wooden raft secured with rope. A boat takes him out there and leaves him with some supplies. Now, being trapped in the middle of the ocean is scary enough on its own, but later that night, Charlie begins attracting sunken wrecks from all over the ocean. They get pulled together around him and eventually drag him down. This is absolutely horrifying. Not only drowning, but these ships have been on the seafloor for decades. There's no telling what kind of creatures have turned them into their nests. And I don't think they'd be too happy about being brought up to the surface. This episode really hits that tassophobia itch with a good helping of creature horror for dessert. Coming in at number 4 is The Bugaboo Bear, a story about a girl named Emily who prances around like a little angel. She loves being sweet, playing with dolls, baking with her grandmother, and wait a second. Am I watching the right show here? Yeah, I think so actually. We go on to hear about how much she loves her teddy bear Cutie. We see all the things she loved to do with him. It's literally like her best friend, which is coincidentally what the bear is always saying. But then things change. She starts to grow out of the bear and loses interest in it, which you might expect to happen, people grow up. However, instead of putting it away and maybe finding a new toy, she begins torturing the bear and performing experiments on it, getting dangerously close to exhibiting signs of growing into a serial killer or something. One day, she locks it in a freezer while berating and insulting the stuffed animal. When she takes it out, for the first time, instead of saying, "I'm your friend," he says, "I'm cold." Emily gets scared and apologizes to the bear, swearing she'll never do anything to harm it again. Is what I would like to say, but no, our little serial killer here actually triples down by performing surgery and removing its stuffing and breaking its voice box. However, later that night, the bear rises and begins grinding down the furniture in her room into sawdust. It then slowly pours the dust into her mouth while she sleeps until she's completely full. Cutie then drags her outside and leaves her in front of a used toy store where she gets purchased by a little girl. They do everything together, just like best friends, until one day the little girl gets tired of Emily, and well, we all know how this story goes. It's basically like the episode of Black Mirror where the girl's mind also gets trapped in a bear. But now the reason that this is higher up on the list rather than, say, Soul Stealer is because both their minds get trapped, but Emily, as you can see, is going to be suffering much, much more. Starting off the top 3 is Season 4's Episode 6, Bunny Boy, which tells the story of a boy named Bill who never eats his vegetables. Okay, here we go, a normal kid refusing to eat vegetables, unlike Toast Boy Timothy. Anyways, to ensure he doesn't have to eat any vegetables, Bill befriends a wild rabbit named Tubbs. He lets Tubbs into his mother's garden so that he can eat all the vegetables for him. She tries everything to keep Tubbs out of the garden, but Bill helps him get around all her traps. Until one night, she stands guard to protect her cabbages. The next day, she gives Bill the giant cabbage, which he tries to get rid of, but his mother keeps bringing it back, washing it off, and putting it on the table. Seemingly out of options, Bill decides to personally take the cabbage to Tubbs to be rid of it once and for all. He stuffs it under his sweater and begins biking to Tubbs' den. Riding through a nearby cornfield, Bill gets close enough for Tubbs to smell the cabbage. He starts running over, while Bill is passed out on his bike due to a lack of any nutrition. Now, these two situations alone wouldn't be too bad if not for the farmer driving a crop slicing machine close by. The three collide in a scene of absolute carnage as we see this. Bill wakes up in the hospital with a doctor watching over him who says the operation was a success. He asks what about Tubbs, but gets sent home without an answer. Bill, still with bandages on, all of a sudden loves vegetables now. In the middle of the night, he even sleepwalks to his mother's garden and starts eating cabbages. Later that day, the doctor comes to remove Bill's bandages, but he starts hopping around. As the doctor explains to his mother that after the accident, Bill and Tubbs were chopped into so many bits that it was difficult to sort out which bits belonged to whom. So he used what he could find to stitch Bill back together. We then see Bill unbandaged. Not only is he a human/bunny chimera, but there are pieces of the bike still sticking out of him. Now I get that there were a lot of bits laying around, but I don't know if it's fair to mistake a bike pedal for a human organ. The mother screams for the doctor to change him back, but he can't. This is one of the most disturbing body horror episodes in a kids show that I can think of. Now at number 2 is The Lobster Scream, an episode about a girl named Shannon Shellfish who was always born wanting more. Her first words in the hospital were, "I want a more beautiful mommy," and when they brought her home for the first time, she said, "I want a bigger house." Honestly, I would have just returned her to the hospital. But because her parents give her everything she wants, she never learned her lesson. Next we hear her screaming, "I want it," and when her dad asks what, she replies, "I don't know, something, everything, a pet, that dog." How this kid isn't locked up somewhere, I'm not sure. Anyways, they end up getting her the dog, but when it makes a mess, she throws it in a dumpster. Now at this point, I'm praying for her to get a good punishment. But instead of that, her parents ask what she'd like as a replacement. Okay, yeah, they are also horrible people. They deserve some of the blame for sure. For once though, Shannon isn't sure what to ask for. That is until a man wearing a lobster costume shows up at the door inviting them to his new restaurant. That's when she decides she wants the lobster costume. The man tries to leave and she attacks him, threatening to poke his eyes out with a stick. He eventually gives in, telling them to come to his restaurant for dinner and then she can have the costume. Her parents ask her if she really wants to go because apparently she doesn't even like lobster. And her dad explains that you can't have a fresh lobster killed at a restaurant like this and then not eat it, to which the girl replies, "But I can." So they actually do try to warn her for once, but she doesn't listen and doesn't care as long as she gets that costume. She even makes her mother buy her new clothes for the dinner, and as they're leaving the store she says they're all ugly and throws them in the dumpster. We also see the dog again. I'm glad he's okay. Now in the restaurant, Savannah orders the largest lobster but refuses to eat it. So basically the complete opposite of what her father said. The chef insists that she must eat it, but she refuses and only wants the costume. But while she's climbing into it, the lobsters jump out of the tank and pick Shannon up before scurrying into the kitchen. We then see them lowering her into a pot of boiling water and hear her screams from outside the kitchen. Hey, the dog made it to the end. But anyways, back to being boiled alive. I had to do a bit of research and the estimate is generally between 3 to 7 minutes for how long it would take you to die from being boiled alive. If that isn't the worst 3 to 7 minutes imaginable, I don't know what is. And now for my pick of what I think is the scariest episode of the show, Tom Time. Right away, we are told that Tom's time was 1 hour behind the rest of the world. We'll see how literal that is later though. Anyways, Tom is generally late for everything. He's late for school and even misses dinner at home because he's laying down. Suddenly, a news broadcast comes on the telly informing the family that tomorrow at noon, the Earth is going to explode due to an unknown force. However, the governments of the world have organized space shuttles to take every person and every animal off the world before the explosion. His mom tells him not to be late, to which Tom replies, "For what?" A horrible sign. But she explains the evacuation is at 11 a.m. Then she does everything possible to wake him up 1 hour early. But Tom sleeps through it all. It's still not too late though, as when he wakes up, his parents are still packing. But instead of getting up, he goes back to bed for a bit. Now, as his parents are frantically getting ready, Tom ever so slowly gets himself ready. You'd think a global evacuation would be a bit more urgent, but he's still trying to have breakfast while his mom yells that the taxi is waiting for them. He actually takes so long that the taxi driver gets fed up and drives off with his parents. Now, instead of rushing and panicking, he eats and plays video games until 15 seconds before the evacuation, when he decides it's time to leave. Naturally, he doesn't make it in time, and the shuttle leaves exactly 1 hour before Tom would have gotten to the site. The only human left on Earth, Tom waits alone. At precisely 12 p.m., the Earth explodes. Goodbye, Tom. Wait a sec. We are then told that even for the end of the world, Tom is late yet again. Trapped in some kind of quantum bubble of Tom time, he drifts amongst the debris for exactly 1 hour until his time was able to catch up with the rest of the world, and he explodes as well. The idea of drifting off into space until your life support wears off has always scared me. Just floating off, being completely helpless. Now drifting amongst the debris of a destroyed world is just a complete nightmare on a different scale. I would be trying to escape the bubble and just end it myself. Well, that's it, guys. This was my list of the top 10 scariest episodes of Grizzly Tales for Gruesome Kids. Thanks for watching. If you guys know of any other episodes that you think should have made the list, let me know down in the comments. And if you liked the video, maybe give it a thumbs up. I know this is my first video on the channel, but I do have more coming, so if you guys want to subscribe to see the next ones, that would be cool too. Anyways, that's all from me, guys. Have a great day and keep it spooky.